We're going to start with the government trying to wiretap Facebook Messenger. So I don't know if you guys know, but when you're on Facebook Messenger, of course, obviously, Facebook is already reading everything you do on there and taking your data and feeding it off to advertisers. But Facebook says that their calls are encrypted. It's two-end encryption. So if I call you, you call me, our conversation on Facebook Messenger isn't going to go anywhere, besides maybe like the advertisers. But here recently, very recently, the US government seeks Facebook to help wiretap Messenger. I'm going to show you this article. This is from Reuters. I love this news source. The U.S. government is trying to force Facebook Inc. to break the encryption in its popular Messenger app, so law enforcement may listen to suspects' voice conversations in a criminal probe. 3 people briefed on the case said, resurrecting the issue of whether companies can be compelled to alter their products to enable surveillance. So, most of you, well, hopefully not most of you, but some of you watching might be like, that's okay. That's okay if I'm getting spied on. I'm not doing anything wrong. So whoever's doing something wrong, like, they get caught, right? And that, while that's a reasonable line of thinking, I don't think it is. Because here we are seeing dystopian novels that we used to be really afraid of playing out, right? I don't know if you guys watch Redacted tonight, but a couple of weeks ago, he was talking about how even in airports now, there's going to be security officers dressed in plain clothes, armed. They're going to be armed, dressed in plain clothes, following around innocent people. And some of the alerts for the security guard is if the person's blinking too fast, if they're sweating, if they're looking at a gate from far away. So we're not just seeing this sort of dystopian multiverse play out in tech, we're also seeing it play out in real life. And these are things that we need to talk about. I don't want to talk about this. This is actually pretty miserable. I'm smiling, but I'm dead inside. But these are issues we need to talk about. I'm going to take you back over to the article so we can continue reading through it. Because then after that, I have to tell you how the Facebook's working with another government. That's not fun. Let's see. The Messenger issue arose in Fresno, California as part of the investigation of the M13 gang. I don't know if you guys remember that, but Donald Trump frequently uses the gang, which is active in the U.S. and Central America, as a symbol of lax immigration policy. The potential impact of the judge's coming ruling is unclear. If the government prevails in the Facebook Messenger case, it could make similar arguments to force companies to rewrite other popular encrypted services, such as Signal and Facebook's billion-user WhatsApp. I use Signal. I use a lot of other encrypted services, so this is particularly terrifying. Let's see. Facebook is arguing in court that Messenger voice calls are encrypted end-to-end, meaning that only 2 parties have access to the conversation. Ordinary Facebook text messages and other services are decrypted by the service providers during transit for targeted advertising or other reasons. The end-to-end encrypted communications, by contrast, go directly from one user to another without revealing anything intelligible to providers. Facebook says it can only comply with the government's request if it rewrites the code relied upon by all its users to remove encryption or else hack the government's current target, according to sources. Stephen Larson, a former judge and federal prosecutor, said the government must meet a high legal standard with seeking to obtain phone conversations, including showing where there is no other way to obtain evidence. And like the U.S. Constitution, as you see here, allows for reasonable searches, right? So like reasonable searches, not continuously wiretapping, reasonable searches. But of course, as a lot of legal terms are, reasonable is one of those legal terms that's meant to be vague, right? Because reasonable can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. What's reasonable to me may not be reasonable to you, right? And unfortunately, that comes with legal discourse. So we are going to talk about, well, first I'm going to go over to the chat. All right, nothing. Cool beans. I'm going to take you guys to an article that Glenn Greenwald, one of my favorite journalists ever, posted on The Intercept in December 2017. So it was in 2017, a little less than a year ago. So you're like, why does this pertain to this? It's like, well, I'm going to show you. Facebook says it is deleting accounts at the direction of the U.S. and Israeli governments. Man, is that not like dystopia as fuck? If that isn't, I don't know what is. But it gets worse. The issue with Israel being able to delete accounts and like Facebook being like, yeah, sure, is what makes the censorship particularly consequential is that 96% of Palestinians said their primary use of Facebook was for following the news. That means Israeli officials have virtually unfettered control over key communications from Palestinians. Now, just a quick backtrack real quick on the Israeli-Palestinian occupation that's going on. The U.S. is perpetuating propaganda about Russia and how Russia is like interfering with our elections and all this other stuff that they don't have proof for. But some of the more realistic threats are Saudi Arabia and Israel. They both actively go to Congress and tell our Congress people how to vote. And with Israel, it's particularly insane because they are occupying Palestine, right? And we all know that they are. But they're occupying Palestine with literal Nazis. They are enlisting white supremacist Nazis to go after Palestinians. So this is like another layer of censorship, another layer of control that the Israeli government has on Palestinians. It's not enough that they're going to their homes and shooting them with U.S., backed by U.S. money. That's not enough, no. They also have to use U.S. companies to censor these people. And U.S. companies are more than happy to comply. We're about to talk about, there's someone in here that I thought was particularly interesting. Facebook now seems to be explicitly admitting that it also intends to follow the censorship orders of the U.S. government. Earlier this week, in 2017, in December, the company deleted the Facebook and Instagram accounts of Ramzan Kadyrov, a repressive, brutal, and authoritarian leader of the Chechen Republic. To put it mildly, Kadyrov, who is given free rein to rule the province in exchange for ultimate loyalty to Moscow, he has been credibly accused of a wide range of horrific human rights violations, from the imprisonment and torture of LGBTs to the kidnapping and killing of dissidents. But none of that dilutes how disturbing and dangerous Facebook rationale for its deletion of his account is. Okay, so let's break this down. A Facebook spokesperson told the New York Times that the company deleted these accounts not because this dude is a mass murderer and tyrant, but that his accounts were deactivated because he had just been added to the U.S. sanctions list and the company was legally obligated to act. The company was legally obligated to act, okay? A Facebook spokesperson has said that, right? So here we are in late stage capitalism, and these companies are starting to act as corporate tentacles. Here I go again with my corporate tentacles for the U.S. government. They are actively shutting these things down. So let's, circle back to the U.S. wanting to wiretap Facebook Messenger. Let's also think back to the fact that the FBI is putting Black Lives Matter activists on their watch list. Antifa, anti-fascists, the people who are trying to stop this Nazi nonsense, are also on a watch list. So if the government wiretaps Facebook Messenger, who do you think they're actually going to be listening for? Given the rate of how many white men consistently start up shooting movies and high schools and all these other things, who do we think they're actually going to go after? And on that note, I don't know if you saw Jordan's videos, but Abby Martin's Empire Files got shut down by U.S. sanctions as well. If you haven't watched those videos, you should. I'm a big fan of Abby Martin and Empire Files. That's like serious journalism goals for me. So, not fun to talk about. I'm going to go over to the chat and see how you guys are doing. Capitalist biz are machines, no morals, no ethics. You are correct, Endosi. You are correct. So I'm going to finish this social media wonderfulness. Oh, excuse me. I burped a little. I just had pizza, so sorry. We're going to end this with an Edward Snowden quote because he sums it up so perfectly. Edward Snowden. Businesses that make money by collecting and selling detailed records of private lives were once plainly described as surveillance companies. Their rebranding as social media is the most successful deception since the Department of War became the Department of Defense.